You've just found the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Here, you'll discover the people and places that make Montana like no other place in the world. If you love to fish, hunt, or just enjoy creating your own adventure in the outdoors, you have come to the right place. The Montana Outdoor Podcast is brought to you by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Go to rmtte.com and see everything they have waiting for you online, or just come by 5680 Expressway in Missoula, and by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, delivering the highest quality lumber, paneling, flooring, and reclaimed wood products anywhere in North America. Let them guide you through the woods at their showroom in Missoula on Highway 93 South or at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, let's go discover Montana's great outdoors with your host, Downrigger Dale. Have a great show, buddy. Can't wait to hear it.
Thank you very much there, Roger. Appreciate you joining us. By the way, Roger's new to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Man, he went on to greener pastures, I guess. We wish him the best. So today we have got a great show. I get questions all the time about elk shoulder seasons. And a lot of times it's because, we keep getting more and more new people that join the podcast, which we just appreciate so much. In fact, I want to welcome in a group that has been with us from the beginning, and we are just honored to have our enlisted military officers and enlisted men and women that are all around the world, active military. And we appreciate that you join us, and we hope that this show brings a little bit of home back to you, and thank you for what you do. Also, thank you to our great veterans all across the great state of Montana and beyond. We love that you join us as well, and hope that all is going well there. In fact, I did have a request, speaking of veterans. There were a few people that wanted to know more about some of the veterans groups that help disabled veterans with hunts. And they wanted to, donate or find out more about them. If you represent an organization that does that, you probably heard Raj there give my email address. But I'll give it to you again, Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. Let me know about it, and maybe we can feature one or two of those organizations here on the podcast. Okay, now back to at hand. Last thing, if you guys would please share, subscribe, all that good stuff to this video. That really helps us a lot on YouTube and other places, so please do that. Appreciate it very much. All right, let's talk a bit about shoulder seasons. Brian Wakeling is my guest. You've seen Brian on this show before. In fact, he was our first video guest that we ever had when we switched to video. So it's good to have his handsome face back on with us again. Now, before we get into that, Brian, I did want to touch on something we had done a while back, talking about the mule deer management. We had done a podcast talking about the challenges that mule deer are facing in Montana and possible changes in management. And you were having public meetings and all that. Plus, there were some comment periods that people could do online. How did all that turn out for you guys? Did that go well for you?
Thanks, Dale. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. But yes, we had what I consider a pretty good turnout. Oftentimes, it seems as though when we hold a public meeting any longer, unless we've just really annoyed people, you don't get quite as many people showing up as what you'd hope for. You can tell when you've annoyed folks because you got a pretty good audience. Also, they usually feel like perhaps you're not getting enough food to eat, so they bring a lot of fruit and vegetables and they toss it to you while you're in the middle of it.
Not throwing it at you, just tossing it.
Oh, exactly.
I see.
But we held 7 different meetings across the state in each of the regional headquarters, and we had probably somewhere between 140, 150 people attend and share a lot of their thoughts and ideas regarding, mule deer management. And kind of the take-home messages, I've got several of them myself, and the public is definitely interested in having mule deer data readily available, and they're willing to invest more money, including increased license fees, if better data makes the agency more responsive. License fees and all that, that's handled by the legislature. It's
Yeah.
not part of the plan, but that was some of the information that they shared with us. They've also, and this has been true about hunters throughout history, they're willing to curtail some of their own activities, having more conservative regulations in place, if that will result in better mule deer numbers.
No?
They recognize we need to work with private landowners. I mean, that was a message that was repeatedly shared. They recognized that increased partnerships, including with nonprofit wildlife conservation organizations, was really important. They understand that habitat has an overarching influence, and it has more effect than harvest or predation does. But they want to make sure we manage all three of those things. That was a message that came through loud and clear. And to put an emphasis on it, predation management is an important component of any management paradigm. They're also a little bit concerned, and this is something we heard in the legislature as well. Non-residents enjoy Montana as much as residents do, but sometimes it seems as though it's disproportionate. And again, that can be something that's a bit of a challenge to manage, but it's one of the messages that we heard. They all had an interest in spending more dollars on research. Again, even if it costs them money. They also noted that it's really difficult to understand some of the challenges facing us with mule deer, including things like chronic wasting disease.
Yeah.
It's a real mystery because it's so much different than so many other diseases, and a lot of the public really don't understand it. The real challenge is that there's not a really good, effective way to manage it at this point in time. The most effective way that we have to deal with it is with harvest. And while most of the public understand that, they'd sure like it if we could come up with a different way.
Yeah, I did a podcast with Dr. Chad Bishop and Dr. Andrew Whiteley over at the University of Montana in their wildlife biology program. And I asked him, I said, you guys are getting more and more into gene splicing and all kinds of different things. Do you see a day that maybe biologically that might be a possibility to eliminate chronic wasting disease that way? And they said they're quite a long way from that. That it's pretty complex, but the short answer was eventually they probably will get there. But
yeah, I mean, it's even diseases that we have learned how to eliminate from domestic livestock are extremely difficult to eliminate from free-ranging wildlife because of the challenges. It's so much different. And just to kind of put a wrap on the mule deer thing, the final thing that we heard, and is that the public supports enforcement, and they're willing to pay for that as well. So, not to cut short the conversation on CWD, it's one of the more important conversations on elk and deer. Any critter that it affects, that's an important conversation. So that kind of sums up what we heard. It's some things were a little bit more pointed than others were, but we had a great turnout, and I think it's really going to help us as we continue to craft that plan. And we're still looking at the end of this year, early next year, to kind of have our first draft out where we'll be sharing that with the public to look at.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you guys will let me know too, and we'll be sure and get that out to everybody, and that maybe we can talk again about it. Now, let's shift gears here a little bit, get into the elk shoulder seasons. Last time you and I talked about this, it was a couple years ago. So I think it's worth getting into. And I guess for the lack of a better term, maybe do a little elk shoulder season 101 here and just kind of cover it, because it can get confusing because, these seasons started on the 15th of August and they will go through the 15th of February. So, but it's kind of a ever-changing, depends on the hunting districts and that. So I guess let's start with just the basics. In a nutshell, what is an elk shoulder season and why does Montana have them?
Yeah, so Montana, like many other states, tends to have a pretty standard, regular set of season dates that doesn't seem to change much by year. The legal animal may change, the number of the quota might change, whether or not you can use a general license or if you need a permit may change, but the season length and the season structure usually stays pretty similar. A lot of times, hunters view those dates as being somehow set in stone, that you can't change those. And so they come to expect them to be at a certain time each year.
Mm-hmm.
So as we became challenged managing elk numbers, the concept came that perhaps elk may be more vulnerable to harvest, or we could be more successful at managing numbers if we had a season that occurred at an earlier date or at a later date. Elk tend to be migratory in much of Montana, and so where they are during the general season may not be where they are at other points in the year.
Right.
So, if we had a season that fell outside of the general season, that includes, our standard archery or standard rifle, and now our standard muzzleloader heritage, if we had seasons that fell outside of that, we might be more successful at managing our elk numbers. And because they fell on either side of the general season, the nomenclature was adopted where they were called shoulder seasons on either side.
Right.
But the bottom line is the commission has the authority to establish seasons on dates at any time they were choose. There's nothing magic about those dates. Those are just kind of conventional dates that we've chosen and we've stayed with over time. But if the commission chose this year, August 20th might be the best time, or August 10th might be the best time. The commission certainly has the authority to do that. But we do try to keep things standard as much as we can. As complex as things can be here in Montana, we try to keep it as standard so that people know what to expect year to year.
Mm-hmm. Now, for licensing or tags, what is used for elk shoulder seasons?
So that's another thing that's pretty widely variable and open to just about anything the commission. The department makes recommendations. The commission chooses to make the final decision on those things. In Montana, each of our licenses are associated with what we call a license permit type, or an LPT. And so you'll see LPT associated typically with the hunting district, and then some naming conventions as to whether or not it's a bull, a cow, either sex, things like that. But technically, these are all license permit types. The vernacular often used by hunters is tag. What's
Right.
your tag good for? So you have your general license, which allows you to hunt in your general season, and depending on what the unit is, sometimes they'll require a permit, sometimes they don't. And so a permit will validate a license to be valid in an area. But usually when you get that permit, it also restricts you to hunting in that area only. It won't allow you to hunt in other areas. So we use the same thing with a shoulder season, general license. And if you look at, go down through the regulations and you look at your hunting district, you can look at license type and the LPT, and it'll tell you the season dates. And what you typically see on an elk season is you'll have an archery season, you'll have a general season, but you'll also have an early season dates and late season dates.
Right.
And
Okay.
the units that have the hunting districts that have those early and late season dates, those are the ones that have the shoulder seasons.
Gotcha.
And so often you'll have a general license, but oftentimes also there will be a B license that'll be associated with that. Some of them may be over the counter, some of them may be a draw only. And what those do is those are valid for antlerless animals. And so the antlerless animals then will be, during that period of time with that B license.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So for folks that are going to, use the shoulder seasons, they really want to get into the regs and review that very closely, because it isn't just any old license that you can use.
Sometimes it is.
Okay.
Sometimes it can be your general license.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends.
Depends on the district.
I was looking at one for this upcoming year, just before we got on here. So if you go to Hunting District 411, for instance, your general elk license is good there right now.
Okay.
August 15th through September 5th. But you can also draw a elk B license, the 41100. They had to apply in June, and that's good from August 15th to September 5th.
Got it. Okay.
And there's also an elk B license that's available over the counter that is good for essentially many parts of Region 4, the 004.00 LPT, and that one's good for antlerless elk in that area, and also good for those early season dates of August 15th.
Are you looking at the 2025 regulations?
That is correct.
Okay. What page is that on? Just to give an example.
That page is 94.
94. Okay.
Yeah. And so what you have to look at is where the opportunity-specific details are really important, because that'll take you through where it's valid. I'd mentioned the 411 double aught. That's only valid on private land. Then I mentioned the 004 double aught. That one is also only valid on private land. Sometimes you get in some of these, the early season dates that I provided, that the general license, that's also only on private land. Sometimes it'll say not valid on Forest Service lands. It gives you some extra information about where you can use those licenses. So it's not always the entire unit.
Mm-hmm. But all that's in the deer, elk, and antelope regulations for 2025 that you would, typically if you got your license, you would pick one of those up and look at it, or you can get it online, which I kind of like because it's real easy to jump from page to page and use it online. So you want to, there's not just a magic document that's there. You got to read through it and look at it. And I assume that's probably done for a reason. You want people to zero in and really understand where they're going. Which brings me to my next question, in that, during the general season, whether it's a general archery or general rifle season, there's a start date and a finish date. It's fairly simple. Other than there are some special permits and things like that. But when you get into these shoulder seasons, it gets a little different. So obviously planning your hunt would be really important. Now there is a hunt planner on the website, which actually can be pretty darn handy. I don't know if folks out there have tried it yet. Use it. It is really good. Can that be used in planning an elk shoulder season? Or I guess bottom line, what's the best way to plan an elk shoulder season hunt?
That can be a real individual challenge.
Yeah.
It's when you think about your general season hunt, you think about, where, if I'm looking at different locations, I'm usually looking at, how many elk are relative abundance, how many elk are there,
Mm-hmm.
how many other hunters go there, Am I going to have competition? How much competition? Sometimes competition can work in your favor. You're looking at maps, you're looking at the layout of the land and everything. And an important consideration is, what private lands are there? What kind of access do you have across private lands? But when you start to look at the shoulder season, some of the other aspects of that, we often think about where elk are during the standard hunting season, but it's important to recognize that elk move depending on what the weather's like.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you have an early season where it's wide open, they'll be a lot higher. If you've got a early snowfall, sometimes you can have an awful lot of elk move down into some of the lower country, and so you have to think about. It can be a little bit more challenging to plan for, because depending upon how many elk have moved into an area, because we're thinking about private land so much, and sometimes landowners, while they may not necessarily, they might value having a hunter come in and politely ask to hunt, politely ask to, offer to remove elk from the area. But at some point, even the most polite asks, when you're getting a lot of them, can start to become annoying. And so it's good to ask ahead of time. Don't show up in the morning of the hunt and expect to have permission.
Right.
You want to reach out to landowners in advance, and they, it's their land. And so, we need to be respectful of that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you can take advantage of some public lands that are close there, but a lot of times these shoulder seasons are really tailored to try to help landowners so that they don't have to suffer the brunt of too many elk.
Right. We're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, I want to finish that little section up a bit, because I had done a podcast recently talking about a film that was done called the Real Yellowstone, and it talked about the challenges that ranchers have these days. And one of them that got brought up that really blew me away was one of the ranchers from a family that's owned a huge ranch for a long time, that a herd of elk can come in and just decimate their property. In fact, he talked about one year, it was just a matter of days, they lost $150,000 worth of hay. And so you could kind of be a hero to some landowners if you plan it right. So we'll talk about that when we come back right after this. They say they don't make them like they used to, but at Superior Hardwoods of Montana, that's kind of the whole point. This isn't just a lumber yard. We're talking about 11 acres of reclaimed wood, wall paneling, flooring, trim, beams, slabs, you name it. Every single piece has a story behind it. Old barns, historic homesteads, long-forgotten factories. This wood has been places, and now it can be part of your story, too. Maybe you're building a home, remodeling a room, or just putting together that dream project you've had on the back burner. Superior Hardwoods of Montana can help bring it to life. They can even custom mill it to fit your exact vision, because real craftsmanship never goes out of style. And here's the thing, you're not just getting character and beauty when you choose reclaimed wood, you're reclaiming American history. You're giving something old a brand new chapter with values that never go out of style. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Whether you're a contractor, a weekend DIYer, or someone who just loves a one-of-a-kind piece of wood, Superior Hardwoods is open to the public and ready to help. Exotic woods, live-edge slabs, pre-finished and unfinished flooring, it's all in stock and ready to go. Need help picking out the right material? Just ask. Their team has been doing it since 1977, and they know how to guide you through the woods, literally and figuratively. swing by their beautiful showroom at 5120 Highway 93 South in Missoula, or check them out online at superior-hardwoods.com. I promise you, you'll leave inspired. That's Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Local, knowledgeable, family-run, and ready to help you build something that lasts. Let them help guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Go see him. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, Brian Wakeling is my guest. We're talking about elk shoulder seasons, hopefully give you some kind of do's and don'ts and good answers to get you going here. Those can be a very advantageous way of getting your elk. But there's very specific rules on all this stuff. And we were talking a bit about private land and getting permission. There's a few places in the FWP website that I found kind of interesting where they go through some suggestions of how to ask for permission and ways to do that. Any other thoughts besides going there that would help educate some of our folks about this, so that they can get a good idea of how to get that all important permission, especially during shoulder seasons where a lot of it is on private land?
Yeah, what I think about is, just consider if someone was coming onto your property and asking you for something. Just, don't show up at a time that's inconvenient. Try to find a time where you can make a polite request. Try not to dominate too much of their time. Be respectful. I think a lot of this it's common sense, and a lot of that is covered on that website. So
yeah,
it's there's nothing rocket science about it, but oftentimes we take for granted, and for whatever reason we consider that somehow they don't deserve what they have or something like that, and so. It's really, really important that we be respectful when someone does, offer the opportunity to have access on their lands.
Yeah, and the important thing there is the more that we, do a good job of that, the more private access we're all going to get. Because when ranchers, I grew up on a cattle ranch, so I've known this very well. The better experience they have each year on granting that access, the more likely they're going to do it next time. And then we see that block management program and all those other things start to grow and grow and grow when people go, hey, that worked out pretty well. They didn't leave gate opens, they didn't shoot any of my cows or any of that. So, yeah.
Well, and the thing, it's kind of like we have to police ourselves because, you think about, if you're an angler, you spend any time on the side of a stream or at a lake or someplace. Oftentimes, places where a lot of use occurs, you find, wadded up line or hooks, garbage laying around. And it's not like every angler that comes out there throws garbage around, but there's a few that do, just like there's a few hunters that do things like leave gates open. And when they do, it reflects poorly on all of us. And so taking the time, if you don't have to do battle with somebody in the field. I mean, you don't have to accost them. But if you have the opportunity, so you see somebody leave a gate open, close the gate. If you see somebody drop a pop can or something like that, pick it up. We can do a lot to help ourselves, and I think that's the kind of thing that's appreciated, because the things that are not appreciated have the opportunity to close the doors for the rest of us.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I've noticed about elk shoulder seasons is, we've touched on it quite a bit here, is the unpredictability of it. So in other words, if there was a hunting district that had a shoulder season, does that necessarily mean there will be one there next year?
What we tend to do is look at elk populations in relation to the objectives that are established within our elk plan that was adopted in 2023. That's one of the guiding documents that we use. And in there, if you look at it on a district by district basis, there's numbers that we want to maintain. We don't want the numbers to go too low. We don't want the numbers to go too high. We have objectives in place at times for bull to cow ratios. There's a desire to see a certain amount of recruitment come in. And so what we look at based off of our surveys, and it doesn't necessarily reflect in a single survey, but we often look at things like 3-year averages and things of that nature to take out the vagaries and the idiosyncrasies in an individual survey or something. But for the most part, typically if we have a shoulder season in place, it's very likely to stay there for a period of time until we achieve the objective that we've been trying to reach.
So pretty much a performance-based kind of deal then.
That's the goal when we first established them back in about 2015. They were called performance-based shoulder seasons. And it used to be something that was looked at very critically. The agency still looks at it annually. We still post all the information on the performance. Those performance-based metrics get posted on our website. They'll be up probably in the next 2 weeks for the past year. And we continue to look at that and help us evaluate where we want to keep them or perhaps institute a new one.
Mm-hmm. So if I understand this right, so determining where a shoulder season is going to be, does that just basically depend on population in that area based over a period of time that you say, boy, that's getting clogged up with a lot of elk? Or maybe talk a bit about how that's picked.
Sure. So if we've got a district, the management objective may be to manage that for 2,000 to 3,000 elk. If we're looking at surveys over time, we may see surveys start to increase and go above that. Or we might see elk move into there at a certain time of year that is in excess of what we would routinely expect to be there. And so that's when we start to think about, can we implement a shoulder season? Several of the metrics that go in there to help us determine whether or not they're being successful is we take a look at the recruitment in the area and what we anticipate coming in for bulls and cows. And so are we harvesting enough bulls and cows when we look at the sum of what's taken during the general season and what's taken in the shoulder season? Are they being effective? Are we actually harvesting the recruitment? And then if we're not, why not? Sometimes it may be something that's, and this is part that's built into the performance-based metrics, is if we're pouring people in there and they can't harvest them because they're in inaccessible areas, we may consider pulling that season out of there. It doesn't help to put more people on public land if they can't get to the areas where the elk are spending their time. We want to be able to have that access. And so should we, in that example, if we're managing for 2,000 to 3,000 elk, if they get up to 3,500 and then we start to see that population coming back down and dropping into 2,700, for instance, we might recommend the elimination of that shoulder season. And so looking at all the metrics that go along with it, are we actually being able to, we don't want to over harvest, but we want to be able to, and we don't want to impact the general season that people have experienced. Or part of our objective is not to have too much of an influence on that season as well. So trying to get the extra ones, not trying to kill the ones that people were typically harvesting at a different time of year. It's a real balancing act.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys keep track of this one, but I assume just due to the nature of elk shoulder seasons, that being that they can get a little confusing, people call in to the FWP and in different regions and say, hey, I got a question about this or that. Have you guys kind of kept track of what are some of the most frequently asked questions for elk shoulder season? If so, what would those be?
I don't know that we've done a particularly good job of enumerating those, or at least I haven't got a list of them at my fingertips. But I think a lot of the questions that we've been discussing here today kind of fall into that category. It's, why are they there? Gosh, if there's a shoulder season in place, does that mean, that there's an elk behind every tree? Is it going to
Yeah.
be? Can I get out there and just use a bat and just fill my freezer with meat
Yeah.
that way? And the answer to all of that is elk are incredibly good at detecting where hunters are and avoiding them.
Yeah.
And so, despite the fact that we may have more elk in an area than we necessarily want, that doesn't mean it's going to be an easy hunt. There's a lot of states have had those kinds of experiences. I can remember talking with a manager I knew in Arizona, and they just opened up a cow season at one point in time, and having a hunter come into their check station and like, man, I've been hunting for the last 3 hours. I can't even find one. I'm leaving. This was
Yeah.
a waste of time. You got to understand, it's still a hunt.
Yep.
It's not just something that you can go out and expect them to be standing there holding their own freezer paper, waiting to be wrapped in it.
Yeah.
They're still wild animals, and they're going to do everything they can to avoid you.
Well, you got to think about it, gang, and I agree with you. I think a lot of people, when they hear these about shoulder seasons, they go, "Oh, that's got to be jammed. That'll be easy." Think about it in terms, if you were the elk. I mean, you wouldn't make it easy for them. I don't care how many of them were there. They don't want to get put in your freezer. So
Right.
they're going to try everything possible, and they're damn good at it.
Yeah.
They get a lot of practice. It isn't just hunters they have to avoid. They're avoiding predators, all kinds of things. So
Exactly.
they know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah, they do it for a living.
Right. Along
but-
that line, what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that hunters have made during shoulder seasons?
One of the ones that I try to encourage people to avoid, especially in the late season, there's two extremes. There's the early season and the late season. The late season error is recognize that when you get the weather that's most likely to bring elk into play, it can be some of the most challenging weather to navigate.
Yeah.
You deep snows, difficult conditions.
Yeah, you're
cold.
getting into January and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that can be
Yeah.
wicked out there.
And so you have to be really, really prepared, really ready, because it's real easy to find yourself in a situation where you may be spending late nights or even all night out in inclement weather and really bad conditions. And so you want to be ready for that. You want people to know where you are, being able to find you again. And so, your equipment needs to be in good order. Your vehicle needs good tires. And comes back to respecting the property you're on. If you slide off of a rancher's road, you don't want to be tearing up their landscape.
Right.
There's just so much to think about from that standpoint. The other end of it, if you're on the early season, a friend of mine on Sunday evening was able to connect with a cow elk and had an elk on the ground. And, today here in Helena, it's supposed to get to 96 degrees.
Yeah.
You want to think about
That is hot
Yeah.
to try to keep
How
meat from
close am
spoiling.
how close am I to a road? Can I get it out? The last thing you want to be doing is loading a bunch of spoiled meat on a backpack and trying to get it out across a long piece of country. You want to
Yeah.
be ready, and you got to caution yourself. Do I take this shot? What's the right time to shoot? Is it sometimes it's a better decision to let something go rather than try to fill your freezer with garbage.
Yeah. Yeah. We do a radio show. Of course, we do our live Saturday morning show, but I also take part in a local show in Missoula, Montana. And we used to have a guy that owned he's passed away now, but he owned a meat processing facility. And that was one of the things that he complained about a lot during the shoulder seasons. The early season was a lot of spoiled meat was showing up because, especially people that haven't hunted during a shoulder season, they don't realize this is a different story here.
Yeah.
And meat can spoil, he was saying, it can spoil so rapidly in that high heat.
Yeah.
So you got to have some coolers with you, fill them with ice, so when you do get them to the truck, you can get that stuff cooled down. The other thing that he brought up often is he said the flies that can get on the meat can really do a number on it.
Yeah, they can do it remarkably quickly.
Yeah, and he mentioned that he liked to use Pam, the cooking oil. So you spray that on the meat, a lot of times the flies leave it alone.
Yeah, citric acid or something of that nature. There's a number of products out there that do a tremendous job of kind of helping with that. But I'm to the point where it doesn't matter what critter, deer, antelope. I tend to break them down when I'm in the field and get them in game bags right away. They cool down rapidly. You get them up off the ground. Even in warm weather, if you can hang them in the shade while you're trying to get the whole animal out, that can make a huge difference as far as cooling it down and trying to make sure that you got some really good quality. You've got some of the best quality meat you could ever think of, and to have that spoil on you is just a crying shame.
It really is. Yeah.
And when you're thinking about an elk, if that's the first critter you're pursuing, it's a big critter, and so it can be very, very intimidating. But just think about it, take it a piece at a time. Just be diligent, do your best, and it's really not that difficult, but it can be intimidating.
Yeah. We're going to take one last break here, and when we come back, I want to go through some of the questions that I get to ask as the host from people. I get a kick out of it because they'll send me emails to have me ask the questions they're too embarrassed to ask. And so one of them that I'll ask when we come back is because antlerless elk are a major focus in elk shoulder seasons, what is an antlerless elk? So when we come back, we'll have Brian answer that right after this. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Truth is, the Montana Outdoor Podcast wouldn't exist without their incredible support. And if you've been enjoying these episodes each week, maybe it's time to support the folks who help make it happen. So here's the question. Do you need a trailer for work, for hauling gear to your next adventure? Or maybe a new truck bed to help keep your life organized, whether it's for work or play? Well then, go see the folks who already get what you're about. You see, if you listen to this show, you've already got something in common with Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Like you, they love the outdoors. They work hard, and they're dang good at what they do. Their job? Helping people like you get your work done faster so you can get back out in Montana's great outdoors. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer carries a full lineup of Diamond C trailers, gooseneck, equipment, dub trailers, well, you name it. Whether you're hauling a few supplies or towing the big stuff, Diamond C trailers are built to handle it all with reliability and ease. They also carry CM truck beds, the strongest, most durable truck beds around. Plus, they service everything they sell. Need your trailer rewired so the lights work the way they're supposed to? They'll take care of that too. Got a new truck? They'll get you set up with the accessories you need, installed and ready to roll. And don't wait until the last minute to schedule your trailer service. Do that ahead of time so your gear's ready to go when you are. They also stock a huge selection of parts for Boss snowplows, CM truck beds, and Diamond C trailers. And if it's not in stock, they'll find it. Need financing? Well, they've got you covered there, too. Need a gooseneck or fifth wheel hitch for that rodeo trip or family outing to the great outdoors? Yep, they install those, too. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They're in Missoula at 5680 Expressway. You can call them at 406-549-4243 or check them out online at rmtte.com. That's Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer, rmtte.com. Now let's get back to what Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer helped create, the podcast. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, Brian Wakeling has been kind enough to spend time with me as we talk about the elk shoulder seasons for 2025. And Brian, I get the job of asking the questions that people are too embarrassed to ask sometimes. So I always say asking for a friend. But anyway, what is an antlerless elk? Because we see and hear that term a lot with elk shoulder seasons, that this is for antlerless elk. One, is it always just antlerless elk in a shoulder season?
So, you always I always jokingly say there's no such thing as a silly question. But if there was, it would sound an awful lot like that one right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not a silly question. So for the most part, in most situations, what we're looking for if you're trying to reduce a population is to harvest antlerless animals. You rarely, unless you do an extremely significant removal of bulls, one of the things I jokingly say a lot is, you hear hunters sometimes say, well, let's shut down the buck season for a few years and let the population rebound. You're like, well, bucks don't have babies.
Right.
And it doesn't take very many bucks to get the job done. They're expendable. So for the most part, when you're looking to reduce populations, antlerless animals, be it a deer, be it a elk, or in the case of pronghorns, the does tend to have shorter horns. Mm-hmm. They still have horns, but they're shorter horns, and so that's what the focus is. So an antlerless animal isn't as simple as one might think.
Exactly. I've heard the story where, somebody says, okay, they shoot the animal, then they get up to it and they go, oh, crap, I didn't see that. There's horns on there. Am I in trouble?
Yeah. And so what Montana has tried to do is to be a little bit forgiving, recognizing that there are times when you can't see a short antler. And so within Montana, an antlerless animal is an animal with antlers 4 inches or shorter when you measure it from the base of where the pedestal is on the top of the head, mm-hmm. From the skull to the top.
4 inches or less. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And similarly, if you're looking for an antlered spike animal or something, you want to have something that's over 4 inches. And so depending on what side of that argument you're on, sometimes that can add more confusion when you're looking at an antler on an animal. You finally put it on there and you go, well, is that 4 inches long?
Yeah.
So to the extent that we try to make it as forgiving as we can, there's always the other side of it that makes it a little bit more challenging. Mm-hmm. And so Montana uses that 4 inch marker because there are times, and I know lots of people over the course of years have made a mistake. My son did it when he was like on his first deer hunt.
Hmm.
And so it's an honest mistake people can make. And so Montana has tried to be forgiving in that sense. So an antlerless animal can have an antler, just not a very big one.
Right.
My
Yeah.
advice to everybody is try to be dang sure, and if it's got an antler, avoid it anyways.
Yeah. When in doubt, leave it out. But
Exactly.
so, in the podcast description, I always put some links, and I'll put a link to some. I found a chart or two that kind of shows that. You can look at it.
Yeah. I mean, right within the deer elk antelope regulations on page 9, they've got information there on all of those species and talks about those breakpoints.
Right. So familiarize yourself with that, gang, and make sure that you're in there. Now, if you make a mistake, I've had wardens on here before, and they'll be the first to tell you, turn yourself in. Don't try to hide this, and it's best just to fall on. Ask for mercy, and often a warden will understand that, especially when they can get a chance to look at it. So don't freak out and try to cover it up. Usually the cover up's worse than the crime itself.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Dale. I mean, that's one of the things that, and I've written a couple of articles on this, not for Montana, but I think it's really important as hunters we think about. What would I do if I made a mistake? Because that's what it is, a mistake. I call it the difference between making an honest mistake and someone that goes out and intentionally violates and kind of crosses the line into what I call heinous bad guys.
Right.
There's sometimes officers don't have an awful lot of discretion, but what I will say is that by trying to hide errors that you've made, you actually compound those things,
Yep.
and you violate more than just the original law that you may have broken. And at times, it's part of what's instilled in us. It's steeped in us. We're ethical hunters. We do the right thing. It's important to us, and we don't ever stop to think what would happen and when we make a mistake. And I think this is similar to what must happen to people that are involved in hit and run accidents.
Yeah.
You don't ever foresee that this is something that you would be involved in, and then when it happens, your panic overwhelms you, and you run and you commit bigger problems than if you just stay put.
Right.
And that's the thing, is think about it. If you find yourself in a situation where you've done something like that, sit down. You can't tag an animal that's not lawfully taken, so don't tag it. Take a minute. You've got something to write with. Write down what happened. Describe it. Keep that with the animal. It's fine to field dress it because you don't want it to go to waste. But then the first thing you want to do is get to some place where you can contact Fish, Wildlife, and Parks.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 1-800-TIP-MONT, call them, let them know what's happened, where it is. They'll have someone out there to help you. And it's far, far better. Think about it. I just keep encouraging everybody, think about what you would do before it happens. Because if, Aldo Leopold talks about, the things about the ethics and fair chase amongst hunters, because it's something that happens when nobody's looking.
Right.
But you never know when somebody is looking. And
exactly.
So if someone sees you do that, one of the biggest advents to our ability of enforcement is the cell phone. And so if somebody sees you, and sometimes you don't know when they've seen you or not, want that guilty complex or guilty conscience to be overwhelming your, why you do the right thing, but just do the right thing.
Yeah.
Think about it ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not a criminal, so don't look like one. That's the best thing.
Yeah.
I'll go through a few other quick ones here that I get often in my email. So just to cover some of these others before I let you go. Typically in Montana, do you know about how many elk are available in shoulder seasons?
I couldn't give you a number off the top of my head. Right now, the counts that we're conducting, consistent with our elk plan, I mean, we typically seeing somewhere in the neighborhood of 140 to 145,000 elk. And that's what we see.
Mm-hmm.
And so we recognize there's more than that out there. But we don't estimate numbers like we do for some.
About how many get harvested, do you know?
That's a good question, and I don't have that number on the top of my head. It's a pretty good number.
Okay. Yeah, if you run across it before I release it this Saturday, shoot me and I'll put it in there.
Yeah.
Is it true that all shoulder seasons are on private land?
I won't say all. Predominantly, they're trying to focus on those, but there are places where it's available on public land or block management areas,
Mm-hmm.
and so you're looking for places where it doesn't really matter where they're overabundant. If they're overabundant, we want to be able to manage that.
Mm-hmm. Are outfitters allowed to guide during shoulder seasons?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. How much discretion on who hunts and where do landowners have? I get this one a lot where they say, oh, landowners are just doing it so them and their buddies can just have a private hunt. That's not the case, right?
It all depends what kind of a situation you're in.
Uh-huh.
If you want to take part in any of the programs that the department office offers, state legislation statute dictates that you have to offer some degree of public access.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you're in a hunting district that has an open hunting season, you're not required to open your land to it.
Right.
And if you've got someone who has a license that's valid in your area, you can choose to let that person on or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's always up to you. Even with block management areas, we have two of those, the Type 1, the Type 2. Type 1s are basically open to anybody. You can just come up there and sign in and go on. The Type 2s, you have to call and make an arrangement, and they regulate who comes on and who comes off.
Yeah.
But even on the Type 1s, if you're a bad, if you're kind of the bad behavior kind of guy, you can be kept off of that area.
Sure.
Or others. And
Mm-hmm.
so, it runs the gamut. Elk hunting access agreements, if they provide those, they have to provide some public hunting opportunity, but they also have the ability to take advantage of getting some to their family or to employees affiliated with the ranch. So, it's a depending on which program you use, there's a wide variety of control, but every one of our programs requires that they provide some level of public access.
Mm-hmm. Another one I get often is that folks will say, I don't like elk shoulder seasons. I don't want to hunt in them because of weather reasons or whatever. And I feel it's unfair because they take away from what I could harvest in the general season. Would that be true?
So one of the metrics that we look at with the shoulder seasons is, and one of the fundamental objectives was that we would put these in place with the intent that they would not impact the general season.
Mm-hmm.
To some degree, that's a little bit of a challenge because if your population's over objective, and you reduce that population, you're
Yeah.
probably going to see some effect on the general season. But again, keep in mind that oftentimes what we're trying to target with these shoulder seasons are elk that are present in accessible areas at times when they aren't present during the general season.
Exactly.
So,
And so you're getting a little more access than you normally would. So,
yeah. But the fundamental objective associated with that is that we don't have an overriding influence on the general season opportunity.
Do other states have elk shoulder seasons?
So, to my knowledge, nobody else calls them that.
Okay.
But like I said, while Montana's commission, our Fish and Wildlife Commission, has the authority to set seasons at whatever time they choose, other states do as well.
Yeah.
Arizona, they've got probably an order of magnitude fewer elk than we do, at least. But they also have that same kind of a challenge, and so they establish seasons that occur at other times of the year. Nevada's got that. Just about every state, again, is going to have elk problems are very similar. It's just the magnitude to which you're dealing with them. Nevada probably has 18,000. Arizona was somewhere around 35,000, 20 to 35,000, depending on where they were. And with us seeing, 140,000, we know we've got a pretty good bunch of elk. And private land is, Nevada's got about somewhere in the neighborhood of less than 15% of their state's private. Arizona is somewhere less than 25. Here we're about 2/3 of the state's private. But elk know where property boundaries are, whether they're marked or not. And every one of those states has dealt with the same challenge of elk being on private and not necessarily being appreciated there. But
well, bottom line is it can be a good way to fill up your freezer. If you don't care about getting the trophy and you just want some really good meat, it's a good time to do it.
It's a perfectly good piece of protein.
Yeah. Have I missed anything here, Brian, that we didn't cover that you wanted to make sure we talk about shoulder seasons before I let you go?
I think we did a pretty good job of covering everything, and I'll get you that information on what our harvest is and before the end of the day. And I think we've done a pretty good job of kind of touching all the various ends, and appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, and hopefully people have learned a little bit.
Yeah. Once you get it down, folks, it's pretty easy to do, and like I say, it can be a great opportunity to fill up your freezer. I always say, just like anglers do, it never hurts if you're wondering about, especially when we get into those different conditions of the severe ones in the early or the late part of elk shoulder seasons, or the challenges of early seasons. Talk to people who hunt shoulder seasons a lot and just ask them, what advice can you give me? It never hurts to do that too. So anyway, thank you, Brian, for spending the time with us again. And hopefully everyone will get their questions answered by this. If they don't, I'll put your email in there, and folks can contact you, or they can contact me, and I'll track you down and get the questions answered. All right, there you go, folks. Elk shoulder seasons. Hopefully you understood them all. Remember, there is no such thing as a stupid question. See, I even did it, and Brian said I wasn't stupid. So never know once he hangs up. Anyway, so you guys go out there. Be safe out there. Remember, these seasons are a little different, so be prepared. Be safe and be good to each other. And ask for that permission. We'll talk to you soon here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for watching the Montana Outdoor Podcast. There's no way we could do this podcast without the incredible support of sponsors like Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock, high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And of course, Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snow Plows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. go see them on the web at rmtte.com. We'd love to hear what you thought of this week's podcast. When you get a minute or two, shoot us an email and tell us your thoughts. Same goes if you have any questions for Rigger or this week's guest. Just send your questions or comments to downrigger@montanooutdoor.com. Hey, don't forget we should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, gang, we hope to see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.